Alrighty,
Good
is it on yet?
afternoon. This is Mariette Abrahams, CEO and founder of Qina. And we are here today to talk about tech trends in personal health and nutrition with Abu Yerlan from Startus Insights. We're going to spend about the next hour together. It's really laid back. It's really conversational. We're going to give you some background. But before we start, please make sure that if you have any questions that you type them in the chat box below, or if there is time as well, you can also unmute yourself and ask a question. And this session will be recorded, so it will be available in the platform afterwards, together with the transcript. Hi, Karen. And so you can access it also later, together with the contact of both Abel and myself. So how we will do this is that Abul will present a few slides, and then I will present a few slides. Maybe we'll have a few questions in between if anybody has any, and then we'll have a kind of a Q&A discussion at the end. As I said, we will stop on the hour, so that we like to keep on time. So with that, I'm going to just go through Qina. So Qina is a strategic nutrition innovation consultancy, and we work in the area of food and health, nutrition and tech. We work mainly with food and ingredients and health tech companies to help them to innovate. We provide strategic advice, innovation support, and also conduct research. We have two sides of the business. So we have the Qina platform, where we track the personalized nutrition industry and have expert created content. And then we also have our consultancy services. Now, for this webinar, of course, as we track the personalized nutrition industry, we really see kind of the trends that are happening in the industry, and this really changes from year to year. This time, what I thought about is really looking at this Gartner hype cycle, which some of you may be aware of, but it's looking at really what are the expectations of the technology and how does this change over time. So you can see in the beginning, there's kind of like this new technology, that's kind of the trigger of interest. Then there's a huge expectation or consumer expectation that of what the technology will deliver on. And then there's disappointment. So yeah, disillusionment. So we don't really know what's happening, why it's useful, what value does it bring. And then you kind of progress into the next phase, which is around enlightenment, and it's really seeing, okay, there may be use cases, and then which then move into productivity, which is where it's now become ubiquitous and we use it all the time. And of course, the use case becomes absolutely clear. So with that, we look in this webinar at different technologies and how that plays out not only in food, but also in health and nutrition, and kind of seeing how it maps onto the hype cycle and where it's really being applied already. So with that, Abu, I'll hand over to you to kind of introduce yourself and just let me know when you want me to move along the slides.
Totally. Thank you so much for the introduction, Mariette, and a pleasure to see the few of us who are joining here right now. And I'll also say hi to everyone who will be watching this in recording, since there's probably going to be a bunch of people doing that. A little bit of context. Yes, I represent a company called Startus Insights. Much like Qina, we specialize in innovation. However, we do not have a certain focus in terms of industry. Instead, the main need that we satisfy as a company is identification of startups, scale-ups, more mature, innovative companies across the world and industry agnostic. And besides that, we also provide an opportunity for research in things like trends, patents, as well as discovering certain academic literature that might be pertaining to things like spin-offs in certain research centers. So that being said, we can skip to the next slide here. Also, a bit more of context, what we have on our side as the kind of main source of everything that we do is what you can see here, the discovery platform. So again, like, we have a platform on our side, and what our platform does is it lets you efficiently search through the global pool of startups and scale-ups. At the moment, we have over 7 million of them, and the database is dynamic so that we're up to speed. And essentially, I had conversations with Mariette, I believe, around the second half of last year. And at some point, we thought it would be interesting to join forces and talk about the research that we might have overlap. And obviously, given the focus of Qina, it would be in the area that has to do with nutrition and food. And from our side, it would be also be interesting because we provide research on all sorts of industries and for different use cases. And it would be a kind of a new format for us here to join a partner like Kina with very deep running and hands-on scientific expertise in an area, and see how our more, I would say, general insights align there. So that being said, what we're going to get from our side is on the next slide we'll present the analysis that our analysts provided from the discovery platform that I just talked about of trends in food technology, why food technology instead of right away, say, personal nutrition, which we will hear about later, is because we like to analyze things on a greater scale to discover more so the technological trends rather than go into, I would say, very specific and narrow data points. So from here on, I think what would also be interesting to see is that while there are trends that we're going to zoom in that have to do more directly with, say, the food and beverage produce itself and with nutrition, the majority of trends that we see across food technology after analyzing over 12,000 startups and emerging companies in the area is that it's interesting that most of the technological trends kind of have to do with food, but outside of the food itself. So things like traceability, e-commerce, everything that pertains to the logistic aspect of delivering the food products to where they eventually need to go. And obviously also having to do with that, things like safety and security measurement, the sustainable packaging, automation of processing, and finally, the four trends that I would like to focus on, it would have to do with plant-based proteins and ingredients, and as well as meat substitutes, personalized food, and gluten-free products. And yeah, why I mentioned here that across the plethora of data points that we've analyzed, the kind of trends that have to do not with food necessarily itself, but with the surrounding aspects of the production are interesting is because, as we'll see on the next slide, when we break down the size of these trends, or let's say how many of the 12K startups that we analyzed are falling into each of those categories, we see that actually the four trends that have to do with food itself and that would be relevant for a nutrition focused conversation are the smallest four ones, which is interesting because it kind of calls for, I would say, a more maybe high level analysis where we take into account also these overlap areas where food tech overlaps with logistics or overlaps with, for instance, manufacturing, but also the fact that these four trends that would be the focus from now on are the smallest should be exciting for us because it means that they have a lot of space to grow, and there is quite a lot of opportunities to get advantage of in the coming years, as we'll see in a minute. And a little bit of a disclaimer here that I have not yet put out is that, unlike Mariette here, I do not have a background in nutrition and do not have a specific expertise there. So I think it would be useful to some of our guests here and maybe listeners that will be checking this out later, because I come in as a sort of a good narrative device to introduce maybe some of our guests who also don't have a great expertise but can look at some data, and so that later Mariette would be coming in with her expertise on the nutrition area specifically and helping us understand the deeper insights on the things that I'm also going to talk about. That being said, we can move on to the trends themselves.
Sorry,
Sorry, go ahead, Mariette.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, quick question. When you say food e-commerce, do you mean, like, in our world that means meal kits, or what does food e-commerce mean in your world?
I would say that e-commerce means just the organization of um, online purchasing and yes, ordering food. So it has to do also with food deliveries. It has to do with all the,
Okay.
basically overlap between the world of online transaction on one hand, and on the other hand of food itself, meaning not only the production and delivery, but also things like storage of it and the logistical aspects of it as well.
Got it. Got it. Got it.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and again, a bit of a general overview here as far as data goes. Of these 12K startups that I mentioned, it's interesting to see that when we look at the global distribution, although there are surely usual suspects here, so we see that traditionally US, Western Europe, and Southeast Asia are quite booming regions, there are still many points that contribute innovations that are a little bit outside of, say, the usual hotspots. And yeah, with this, I would say the overview of the most general level is concluded, and we can go to the few trends that are having to do with food right away. And first, we have, of course, plant-based proteins, the larger of the four trends that I'll be focusing from now on. And here, yeah, we see that there are quite a few technologies that are innovative, that are fueling this trend specifically. But first, a little bit about how uh, the trend is doing on the market. Currently, we see that if we're talking about just beverages aspect of the trend, we see that the market is estimated at over a billion, $1.3 billion at the moment, and expected to double in the next 10 years with the 9.6% annual growth rate. And also here, of course, you'll get all the slides after the webinar, and all the text that you'll see in blue will refer you to the research that we're referencing for it. And unsurprisingly, among the growth drivers for it is not only specific diets that are becoming increasingly popular among consumers, like veganism, vegetarianism, and flexitarian diet, but also the fact that often plant-based proteins can support weight loss and provide specific nutrients that are needed for a certain, say, individual nutrition plan. We see that more and more. Besides that, there are quite a few of plant-based protein varieties that we see on the market that are contributing to the products within this trend. So those would include walnut, hazelnut, pecan, pistachio, buckwheat, and sunflower seeds. And these are just the few of the bunch. And when it comes to the overall, not just beverages, but in general, the plant protein market, it's even bigger. Now we see that it's estimated at 18 billion, and in the space of the next 5 years, it's expected to grow by another 5 billion up to 23 billion. So even though it is fairly small compared to the other trends that we saw, there's still quite a room for growth. And we see that more and more startups are popping up with their specific propositions for whatever the consumers within the trend demand. That being said, we can go on to the next slide, because part of what we do, a quite important part of what we do, is provide intelligence on specific startups themselves. This is just a snapshot of what we can usually offer, and just to give you a couple of examples that we see as good representatives of the trend, here first we have the Indian startups called Devagera Biosolutions that specializes on protein concentrates. They can provide quite tailored proteins for different use cases, be it, for instance, a sustainable replacement for eggs to use in a vegan kitchen, or things like specific nutritional benefits that the consumers might be looking after, and there they would have the protein concentrates for that. And besides that, they have a technology that implements a water-based extraction method to produce water-soluble proteins with balanced amino acid profiles. And what's sometimes important to consumers is that they produce a soy-free and non-GMO produce. So this is something that they put on their front page as well when they present themselves. And another quite different startup that we see that was formed fairly recently, 2023, is Edonia. It's a French startup and it's focusing on algae-based proteins. They patented their own technology called idonization, and basically their main ingredient, specifically algae, provides a way to mimic meat-like texture, and also if you've ever encountered algae-based products previously, you know that the flavor is quite packed with umami notes, which is another kind of aspect that is beneficial to their produce. And in their case, we also see that they have secured 2 million euros from EIT Food organization, one of the EU-sponsored organizations to foster innovation. So this was raised in their seed fund, and at the moment we keep monitoring them and a lot of companies like them. So if you ever have a need to find a startup within a certain industry and with certain use cases and find more about details like their financial history, you can also do that with our platform. That being said, this was about the plant-based proteins. We can move on to the next trend, that would be gluten-free food products. Here also the drivers of the trend are fairly well known and self-explanatory. First of all, a lot of health conditions just dictate a necessity to maintain a gluten-free diet. First and foremost, of course, celiac disease, but besides that, health benefits of the diet are also attracting more and more people to go towards it. And as a result, we see that there is a growth of the trend that's projected to reach another 4 billion in overall estimation within the next 4 years, with an annual growth rate of 9.6%. And this industry is particularly interesting because it combines a number of quite innovative technologies on its side. So first and foremost, it is, of course, the technologies that would provide an opportunity to offer versions of similar or well-known products that would be adequate to the gluten-free diet. Besides that, also without gluten, there is a need to think of the shelf life of products, and that manifests in providing innovations like protective coating of the ingredients to preserve their freshness. And finally, there's also to provide products gene editing employed with a already quite familiar CRISPR technology. We'll see all of that with the startups that would be representative of this trend. So on the next slide, we have a couple of those. First and foremost, the Spanish company Bread Free. They are quite notable because they did something truly innovative. They developed the first, I believe, first in the world, a completely gluten-free flour, barley, and rye. And at the moment, they're developing their products with combination of biotechnology and AI, as they claim. And of course, their main product, which is the flour in question, is aimed to provide a good and fully functional alternative of usual flour for celiacs around the world. They were founded in Spain in 2020, and the other highlighted startup that we have here is from Turkey. It's called Farmhood, and it uses gluten-free and freeze-dried fruit and vegetable products to provide an opportunity for a gluten-free, diet-friendly snacks that would also be preservant of the health benefits. And they have their own proprietary freeze-drying technology that helps retain all the nutritional value of the products in question. Yeah, that being said, this is two of our two of our four trends covered. We can move on to the next one, that would be personalized food. Now, this is something where later we could come up to this maybe, and Mariette could tell us some of her reactions or insights on the general things that I'm about to say. But overall, yes, we see that similarly as to the previous trends, there is a growing demand for um, diets that would be aligned with the health and wellness expectations of the consumers, and that is driving considerable growth on the market for the trend. We see that currently the size of the um, personalized food companies combined amounts to 15.5 billion, or rather that was in 2024, and within the next 9 years the growth is projected to um, get the overall valuation of it fourfold, and with a quite staggering annual growth rate of 14.63%. And here, one key technology that is worth highlighting is the 3D food printing that allows to customize meals and their nutritional makeup while also keeping food production at scale. So this is something that a lot of startups we see are taking advantage of, and yep, as highlighted here, for instance, in a report from UK's Food Standards Agency, they highlight the opportunity that 3D food printing gives to also customize, besides the nutritional makeup, the shape, color, flavor, and texture of the food. So we'll probably see a lot more 3D printed food in the future. As for the companies that we have highlighted for the trend on the next slide, it's interesting here, although we choose randomly which companies to represent certain trend. Here we have a similarity in terms of both companies providing an app for their consumers. First, the Estonian startup EatBeat offers a app that not only helps clients stand close to their meal recommendations based on their personal conditions and preferences, but also they have implementation of computer vision and AI-based recognition of images to provide information on the micro and macronutrients from the images of food that you can capture with your phone, for instance. And besides that, they have a specific focus on the Nordic diet, so they also promote the opportunity to connect to the restaurants and other food producers nearby that would develop produce that would comply to the diet. Other than that, we have here presented a Spain-based startup that is currently actually, when I was researching them just before the webinar, I saw that they've grown quite a bit. They were founded in 2021. They're called Me Food Omics, and their main product is the app called Orangi, that enables not only consumers who have certain nutritional preferences or maybe wellness goals that are associated with their diets, but also professionals on the other side, who would be the providers in this case. That would be, of course, nutritionals, personal trainers, and physicians. So the app unites both and offers the latter the opportunity to create customized meal plans and analyze physical data of the clients for a continuous and meaningful collaboration there. And currently, they are offering AI analysis and even DNA based analysis to refine recommendations for individuals based on their specific conditions, and further provide kind of nutrition intelligence based recommendations for them. And finally, this brings us to our last trend here, which really also grown in the popularity. That would be meat substitutes. This is again fairly self-evident why the trend is growing, because there is a growing demand for either vegetarian or vegan diets that has to do first and foremost with the ethical concerns and also environmental ones, which we can also call ethical. And here we see also considerable growth projected. So currently we are at a point where the market is estimated at $8 billion. However, in 4 years, there's going to be, if the estimation is correct, and growth by approximately 50%, we will reach $12.6 billion in overall estimation of the meat substitute market. And the main technologies here are, of course, lab growing of the um, new ingredient meat, and also precision fermentation that would provide alternatives that would not only retain the texture that we come to associate with meat, but also make the products at the end of the day fit not only in terms of flavor, but also fit for different cooking techniques that we usually associate with meat products, such as, for instance, grilling, searing, boiling, etc. So this is going to be one of the one of the startups that we'll look at on the next slide that is doing precisely that. Here you can see them on the right. The Israeli American startup Chunk Foods are developing plant-based meat alternatives that market themselves specifically as fit for pan searing, grilling, and smoking, so that you could still be vegan and have yourself a very nice barbecue session. And they achieve their products with all the retained textures and flavor profiles through precision fermentation technology. And the other startup that we have highlighted here is called Millo. It's a Swedish startup that introduced mycelium-based alternative meat, and they're currently focusing on keeping their production sustainable, utilizing minimal water, and of course, in this case, the um, basis of the produce, mycelia, is quite the ingredient for that, because I would say that for the production of alternative meat products, it offers quite unique opportunities in terms of growing the product itself. And they have a specific technology on their side too that they call Mute. There's mycelium utilized texture engineering, which creates textures for meat substitutes without using any food binders and ensuring that the product maintains the texture profile that we usually come to associate with meat, and that would also be suitable for the cooking methods that is already familiar to us. So overall, this is the kind of first glance that I had on my side when it's coming to food technology, and I would like to highlight that this is only a tip of the iceberg in terms of the data that we would be available to extract from the platform that we develop here at Startus Insights. So in case there is a need on your side to research specific startups or get overall estimation on technology trends, this is something that we can always accommodate. And if you'd be interested, I'd be happy to talk to you about it further, or maybe even give you a demo of the tool. But that being said, yeah, I would be happy to transition back to Mariette to
Thanks. Thanks.
switch the scale. Yep.
Great. I have a quick question though. And out of all the like the blockchain and the 3D printing and the fermentation, do you see that there's like a standout poster child that's really taking off, being adopted, and actually can show profitability? Do you have a sense of that?
I would say that in general, out of the four trends that we saw, there would surely be plant-based proteins and ingredients overall, because it is the most general one, and hence it is also the biggest market out there. But other than that, I would say that food traceability is a big
Yeah,
trend, because it connects simultaneously to different aspects. So it connects to e-commerce for the transparency of operation, and it also connects to tracking food as a logistical item. Besides that,
yeah.
it allows to manage food waste better, where you could trace, for instance, packaging items, and all of that combined makes it a kind of a crossroads of technological trends. So if I had to make a bet, I would probably put it there.
Interesting. Very, very good. Okay, so let me move to my slides. So, of course, Abel's perspective is really, really great, really into food and food tech and what's happening there. And we are also in tech, but looking more on the personal nutrition and health side, and looking how and which technologies are being incorporated and leveraged on that side. So the first one that I'll cover is generative AI, and of course here we talk about the ones that use large language models such as ChatGPT and Anthropic and Copilot, for example, and they are generally used to provide recommendations, summarize information. They can also analyze, so let's say a product or diet, and also generate content. And so here we've seen really a growth of the adoption or the integration of generative AI since its launch. I read yesterday that actually ChatGPT is now the adoption is 2 years faster than Facebook was, way back then. And so we're seeing this real speedy adoption by consumers. And of course, that translates then into actual products that come into the marketplace. Now, if we look at what consumers are using generative AI for, this was a study published by Harvard Business Review last year, and they looked at why are consumers actually using ChatGPT. And so you can see, like in 2024, it was really playing around about generating ideas, specific search, editing text. It was really, really basic. So these are the top 10. And then this year, things changed really completely. And you can see that healthier living is in the top 10 now. It's been number 10, but it actually jumped up from number 75 last year to number 10 this year. And so this just shows you that consumers are starting to understand the use case of using ChatGPT and what kind of questions they can ask it, and also having this conversation in their own language, in the way that they talk, and see what they get back. And so we can see consumers using this now to create meal plans, to create diet plans, to work out their exercise schedules, for example, and seeing what they get back. But these are also then created in a way, in a content format that consumers then can also download. So we can really see a shift in consumer behavior just with this new technology, and how this is now filtered into actually how this becomes part of their daily lives in terms of healthier living. Now, if we look at the use of generative AI in personalized nutrition solutions that we track the market, we can see that July last year, there were only around 5 companies that actually used or leveraged generative AI, and that has just shot up to about 20 companies in April this year. So we can see as companies get about all the solutions in the industry, 20% of it is around AI and machine learning. So this is about recommending ingredients or creating recipes and meal plans based on your health goals. But now we are seeing more AI technologies coming in. So most of these companies already have machine learning, and now they are layering on this generative AI component where you don't have to constantly change your data that you put in, but you can actually just ask it questions based on your data because it has access to all of that. And so this is really a shift we are seeing. So if you have a company, for example, that does blood glucose monitoring, and you have a sleep tracker, and you have a microbiome test, for example, and you have your mood tracking, it can then make sense of that data. And without you having to look at numerous charts and graphs, you can just ask it a question. And this is the trend we are seeing in the industry. And so here I've just put 2 examples. The one is Dexcom and Aura. So Dexcom has got a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, that can measure your blood glucose levels in real time. So it's only glucose. And they've recently partnered with Aura, which is a ring that tracks your sleep. And so together they kind of make sense of when you are eating, what you are eating, when you are exercising, and then recommending what you could eat for your next meal, for example. So we see not only in terms of ingredients, in terms of meals, in terms of recipes, in terms of actual products to consume or purchase in store. This is where generative AI is then layered on all these different databases. And then you can ask a question that what shall I eat next? Or what drove my, the spike in my blood sugar levels? All these different questions can then be asked using generative AI. The other one is an example of January AI, also a US-based company, where you can, of course, complete your personal profile, and with all the data that they've collected over the past few years, is then you can ask it whether you should actually eat a specific product or ingredient before you actually eat it. So it can predict how you may respond before you actually consume a product as well. And it's really driving consumers towards, consuming a little bit of more lower GI products, glycemic index products, but it is in a way a more conversational way of engaging with technology rather than having, a diet list of products and ingredients and foods to consume. And so this is then happening in real time while you are standing in a store, while you are sitting in a restaurant, while you are waiting for your kids to play, their sport. This is all how consumers are engaging now with generative AI to get these real-time responses in a very conversational way and getting it back in very simple language that they actually want and can understand. So where do we think generative AI is on the hype cycle? Well, I think maybe 2 years ago, before or right at the beginning of ChatGPT and Copilot and all these LLMs, they were really around here. So we had kind of the hype, and then it was the disillusionment when it came, and it was, oh, ChatGPT is so incredibly incorrect, it hallucinates, but things are getting better. And Abel and I actually just had a conversation just before we can pick up right at the end. It's to say, where do we see it? Is it really just hype? Is there going to be like a bubble that's going to burst? Looking at the scientific end, I would say in the beginning it was really highly inaccurate. But with the recent research looking at this kind of multimodal generative AI, where you can upload text, you can upload audio, you can upload your dietary intake, for example, and it can analyze. And actually what it did was, in this recent study that came out last year, it was conducted in Ireland, is that it's not so bad to do a nutritional analysis using ChatGPT, because it actually was quite accurate in identifying the food, so recognizing the food, and then nutritionally analyzing. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't good on very big portions and very mixed meals, but actually on smaller portions, it was not that bad. So in my view, we are at the bottom. We are kind of at disillusionment, but we are slowly getting to a point where it's actually going to start moving up, and we can see the clear use cases in terms of analyzing it from a nutritional point of view and providing real-time insights for consumers as well. Now, if we look at computer vision, this is also technology that we see really exploding on the market right now. And this is because food logging is a pain and people do not want to do it, but because of consumer interest in, as Abel said, also in terms of transparency, they want to know what's in their food. They want to know what's the nutritional density of the food, for example. We see a huge uptick in the use of computer vision in solutions. So computer vision can be used to not only recognize food, but it can also then create like a nutritional analysis. And newer technologies can also be used for computer vision to scan your face, for example. And now they're picking up things like how hydrated you are, what is the blood flow like, for example, blood pressure. They are starting to analyze using just facial recognition. So we are seeing more, and body scans is another one that is picking up right now, where AI is then you stand, whether that's in front of a mirror or in the gyms at a station, it then can do a scan and then also use computer vision to then analyze what your body body composition is like, but also potentially what the recommendations can be that can be made based on that. So this is really an area that we see growing, and this is really a growth as we see technology, health, and wellness all colliding and opening up this new era of kind of data-driven and precision nutrition. So here with this was actually computer vision, not generative AI. But you can see again here we had computer vision, around 29 companies in 2023, and now we have about 84 companies that leverage this computer vision. And so this again is on top of the kind of machine learning that does all the meal planning and the recipes. Now we are seeing companies then, so you can scan a meal, you have it nutritionally analyzed, you can have recommendations on how to improve the meal next time, and then you can get recommendations in terms of what to eat, what to buy, and here's a meal plan, and here's some recipes as well. So we can see that this technology is enabling consumers to really make it easier, not only to understand what they are eating, but also to understand what's inside their food, and then to also track how they are eating as well. And this, of course, can then be shared with the practitioner as well, which makes it a lot easier, because if you have very sporadic food logs, it does not help the practitioner to guide and nudge the consumer or the client to make better choices. And so taking a picture, image logging as part of computer vision is really transforming this personalized health and nutrition industry to make it to move them away from manual food diaries or written diaries to now using just what they have in their hand already, which is their smartphones. So some of the examples that we have are Mudho, which is a company in the UK, and they provide epigenetic testing as well as DNA testing, and then they use computer vision as well, using a face scan, and then provide recommendations for diet and lifestyle and biological age as well. The second one is Lifesum, which is a Swedish company, and there you can do your food tracking, snapping the food that you have, getting it analyzed, sharing that with your coach, and getting recommendations and guidance based on that. And then we have MTech Technologies, which is a UK-based company as well. And they have developed a set of goggles, and they are interesting because they are using computer vision by you looking at what you are eating. It can then nutritionally analyze what you have on your plate, but it really also picks up how your mood is, how do you feel, what is your emotions using these when you are wearing these goggles. So they are taking a slightly different edge by looking at more at the behavioral and emotional connection to what you to your food, whereas the others are actually analyzing what you are doing and giving you guidance, and then also snapping with a face scan, for example, your physiology. So these are interesting applications that we're seeing coming up in the marketplace, where computer vision is leveraged. Now, where do we think computer vision is at? Well, if we look at the facial recognition or facial scanning, that's really quite early. So we are seeing, of course, challenges in terms of the databases that they are using, because most of them are either men, or it's better to pick it up and provide recommendations or on people who have lighter skin, for example. So there are still some issues with the facial scannings in terms of the accuracy and the relevance. However, where we see a real application and adoption is food logging. And that's where I say it's slightly more higher on the adoption scale and acceptance of consumers, because the accuracy is getting much better. The last time I looked at research is anywhere from around 86% to 92%. So it's really not bad. And it's only getting better the more these databases are filled with images from a variety of meals across the globe as well. So little bit of further along the hype cycle for meal logging or food logging, and for the glasses, I would say that's still early. The big tech companies are really betting on these glasses. In a way that not only can you then see what you're eating, you can maybe get recommendations for swaps, you can maybe get recommendations for how to pair your meal as well. So there are so plenty of opportunities for the application of computer vision, but in terms of goggles, I think it's still very early, and the evidence is the scientific evidence is not really there yet. So if we move on to 3D printing, which was also mentioned by Abel, here we can really see that it's used to create personalized meals, also foods and supplements. It's a kind of stationary mobile device, so something that sits either in a factory, or it can also be used at home. And here this is interesting as well, because 3D printing has been around for a while. However, we haven't seen an explosion of it. The only company I would say that has really kind of made 3D printing kind of sexy and a household word is Nourished, that have developed these 3D printed gummies where they have 7 layers, and you can, of course, include different ingredients in each of those layers, which then get packaged and then sent to your home, and this kind of on a subscription model. They have ones that are already like this one is ageless, so they have one for weight loss, they have one for dental health, also I've seen, and this is for longevity. That's just a recent one. But then you can also create your own 7 layers, or the combination of your 7 layers, which can include branded ingredients as well. So that's, I would say, kind of the one that we see the most of, that has really, I think last valuation I saw was 80 million or something like that. So they are really quite big already. They're also quite global. They've just expanded to Asia. And so in the nutrition space, health space, I would say Nourished is quite established. Savor Eat is a company based in Israel, and what they've done is they've created this 3D printing robot where you can personalize your plant-based burger. So that already came from Abel. So you can personalize this based on the juiciness and the saltiness and the size as well, and that is kind of incorporated into more of a canteen setting, so that can then be served as part of the workplace eating facilities. The third one I would mention here at the bottom is Essence Food, and I only mention them because I bumped into them at a conference last week, and they are interesting because Abel already talked about this move towards plant-based, move towards kind of upcycled ingredients. And so what they are doing is they are developing a platform at the moment, which they have this technology, which is freeze drying upcycled fruit. So you can imagine food that goes to waste, like bananas, like avocados, like pineapple. And so they freeze dry these upcycled fruits. They then powder them, and then that can then be incorporated into a 3D printing machine, which can then be used to then personalize a beverage, for example, like a shake. So if you have biological data like your DNA or like your cholesterol levels or anything like that, you can then include that as part of your profile, and then have that sent to the cloud, and then the cloud will then create a recipe for you based on your biological markers, and then using these upcycled ingredients can then create a nutrition bar or a shake or a soup or whatever these powders can be used for. So that's how we see kind of this whole movement of the technology and how that merges with health, how that converges with technology, and then also consumer demands for very transparent but also personalized ingredients and products. So where is 3D printing on the hype cycle? Sorry, let's just say 3D printing. I think it's really early because we haven't seen a very widespread adoption of 3D printing. How, apart from Nourished, I would say, apart from the gummies, in the food side, we haven't seen it that much, but I would assume that as consumer demand increases for personalized products, that we would see it more and more. The other one that I actually saw also a few weeks ago was an American company, and they are merging kind of or their vision is that they're going to have AI and machine learning. So you understand your community, and where there are food deserts, so where there is no access to fresh fruit and vegetables, they will have these robots that then can provide a meal kit for you based on your data, and having these recipes as part of the database that can then, as part of the robot, can then create a meal for you. So this is I mean, that's definitely one I'm going to watch. If that's the future, that will be very interesting. I don't know about the price point, but I think it will be very interesting to see now how AI and robotics and then health all come together to then deliver it or create a solution for people that need it most to improve their health. And that is really, I think, the exciting part of all of these trends coming together. So the key takeaways here is that technologies are changing consumer behavior and innovation at this intersection of food, health, and tech. And the science is backing up the use of these technologies, but it's still only emerging and only for some technologies, as you've seen. But the adoption, especially on the consumer side, is moving fast, especially if we look at generative AI technologies, and we can even see agentic AI is now the bigger one that's being talked about. That's still very early for personalized nutrition and health, but it's very important for companies and brands to really keep up with these tech developments and prioritize the technologies only that align with your business purpose and your strategy, because it's very easy to get pulled into shiny object syndrome, and you creating solutions that are not demanded by consumers. So think about sustainability, personalization, convenience. Taste is still king, but health and sustainability are really becoming more part of the drivers for consumer choices. So with that, I'm going to actually, let me first go back to that one. Abu, I think we can have a little bit of a chat, and ask you some questions, because the first thing that I noticed about your slides is this drive towards plant-based protein, which of course we are
Hmm.
seeing the demand for plants, or not plants, proteins exploding right now. And
Yep.
this is because of many different factors, but one of the key ones at the moment is active nutrition, where we see people are, becoming more active. They're more physically active. They think they need a lot of protein, so they consume more protein, want protein in every single thing, even their water. But we are also seeing this shift in terms of GLP-1. GLP-1 is being a big driver, because now, of course, people eat very little, and their protein intake, based on recent studies, show that they're not eating enough protein. So they can eat very little. They've lost their appetite. They've lost their joy for food, and now it's like they have to eat. Yeah, like what do you do? And I was wondering, in terms of proteins, if you see any kind of standout protein. So in my view, it was
Hmm.
still around pea protein, whey protein, but I just came back from an event. I haven't seen like what you showed in terms of buckwheat and rye and all these others. I haven't seen that. Is there anything that you see in your world?
Yeah, not. I believe not quite. I think it's true that you said that. It's just in general, people now seem to be wanting protein everywhere, and I think usually, and I'm not sure how much I can blame the consumers for it, but usually, uh, the depth kind of ends there on the word protein. So protein means good. It means that
Yeah.
when you go to the gym, it's gonna help you grow, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
But there's not much going further. I believe it's a might be a bit of a response to this interesting, I would say, cultural shift, that there's an expectation that we should be more knowledgeable and more, optimized in terms of all areas of our life, including health and nutrition. So we do things like, for instance, trying to incorporate more healthy snacks in our diet and have
Yeah.
more protein in our diet and so on and so forth. But I would say that that still does not necessarily mean that there is enough interest in the general consumer base to breach from that to a more, I would say, data and science backed
Yeah.
outlook on which exactly proteins you need. I think that's also why we don't see, um, the startups like that Indian startup that I mentioned that provides specific protein concentrates for
Yes.
specific purposes. We don't see these like providers getting really big, because I don't think there is a consumer awareness to kind of back it up. Maybe, maybe there will be in, say, a decade or so, because when I think about it, I would
Yes.
think that 20 years ago, there how many people were there that really cared about proteins that much, besides the obviously the people who
Yes.
are engaged in sports and are working
Yeah.
out actively, or people who count their calories. Maybe we'll have to also wait until the general awareness grows to the level where the person in line next to in a supermarket would be able to support a conversation on which proteins specifically are
Interesting.
needed to them. Yeah. So
Interesting.
in general, I would say short answer is yeah. I don't see really the kind of the need now for that level of specificity that you mentioned.
Yes.
I
Interesting.
I
Interesting.
see also that while we were talking, Karen here left a couple
Ah,
comments,
okay.
and she
Yes, you're
highlighted
right.
that dietitians in the US are using GPT to assist in analysis and private practice in telemedicine, and also highlighted
Okay.
this need to double check the responses that are provided there.
Yeah.
So this brings me to, if you don't mind, a question that I wanted to ask, and
Yes.
that also I believe it's a bit of a provocative question. So I believe it's going to start a discussion, and I would say, Karen, you're very welcome to join us here if you have an opinion. But now that thanks to your also great analysis, I keep having this suspicion that whenever I hear about generative AI, it's a little bit like free kids in a trench coat, but it's like a couple of separate technologies in this trench coat that's supposed to be something else. So when we're talking about, for instance, analyzing data from your blood sugar levels and all the different biometrics collected in your sleep, that's great, and I see the use for it. But
Yeah.
we kind of had that just with the big data inputs and machine learning. Then when we're talking about computer vision, that's also wonderful, but I think that we like before GPT we had the Google Lens. Of course, it's better now because with time and with more input and
Yeah.
with just continuous improvement, it gets better. But it brings me to wonder what Gen AI really kind of what difference does it make so far in all of it? Because when it's actually generating something for you, like say in nutrition, in this quite in
Yeah.
this area that requires expertise and scientific knowledge, when it generates something, there is a need to at least check the data. So you'd still need to pull a person with expertise to sit them down and sit with this report that the AI has generated. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering what you two would say. Do you support this kind of a quasi technical sorry,
Yeah.
skeptical stance, or do you have
No.
hopes for AI?
Exactly. And I mean, I think that's why the hype cycle is so good, right? Because people can see it from different angles. And I think, like, if you asked me 2 years ago, then I would have said, yeah, it's definitely, highly dangerous. Don't use it. But now, if you take your expert hat off and you
Right.
really look at it from the shoes of a consumer, and they want to be the experts of their own health. Yeah, they want to empower themselves and educate themselves. And what is standing in between, sometimes they don't always want to feel like they need to first check. I think it's important to have the health, and this is why the value of the healthcare professional, I think, is changing also a lot, because we are there
Mhm.
to make sure that you do get the right gist of what recommendation or what output it's given. But
Right.
I think the fact that consumers want it now. I don't want to
Mhm.
wait until 2 months until my next appointment is due with my practitioner. I want an answer right now. So the convenience factor is there. The second thing is that it's in the format. So if you're looking at health and nutrition, queries are driven by Gen Zs and millennials who are digital natives who want everything via video, and the experts are not doing videos. Yeah, they're not online, and so we have this very challenging situation where practitioners are generally are frustrated because of all the misinformation that's out there. But if you
Right.
look at it from the consumer standpoint, I want the answer right now, and I want it really fast, and I want you to just explain it to me in really simple terms, and I
Right.
just want the answer. I don't want there may be a benefit, or you could do that, and so they want this definitive. And so I think
Right. Right.
we're going to get to this point where I think there needs to be a balance between how can experts get better at leveraging technology, and
Hmm.
how can consumers become more critical of the output that they're getting. And
Right.
that's the balance we need to strike.
Right. Yeah, we see that Karen here agrees with you. Maybe Karen, if you want to unmute yourself, or if I don't know if we get to do it as
I
admins in
think
this
I
webinar?
think Karen may be outside actually,
Ah,
so
okay, yeah, then
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
me.
So she may be typing, but feel free to jump in, Karen. So yeah, I think the next few years are going to be interesting, just because the adoption is something that we haven't seen
Hmm.
before,
Hmm.
and so there needs to be a balancing out. But I think, yeah, experts need to be better at technology, better at tech. Um,
Right.
you need to still have a critical brain, but you need to adopt it yourself rather than saying
Yeah.
don't listen to that, don't use it, because the more you say don't use it, you know what people are going to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that kid with the coat you talked about, they're going to do it. They're going to use it. And
It's
so it's for
interesting.
us
It's
to find that balance.
Yeah, it's a kind of a like yeah, like you said, balance. It seems like a double-edged sword because on one thing,
Totally.
it's kind of like, previously it was the case that I Googled that I have a headache and Google would tell me that I have cancer. Now ChatGPT can do that,
Now
and the doctor
ChatGPT
would
does it
say,
for you.
yeah, maybe don't always listen to the diagnosis of
Exactly.
ChatGPT. But on the
And
other hand,
yeah,
I just want to add that it might add
yes,
to the also the weight and the value of actual expert because at some point there's only so many questions you can ask ChatGPT until
exactly.
it stops giving you a more
Exactly.
pronounced answer. Yeah.
Yeah. And just also that we know that consumers don't trust the information that they're finding online.
Yeah.
So they are using it more and more, but they don't trust it. So they still go to the experts. So that's why I say we need to come together, close the gap, and say we know you didn't. We know you searched for this, and you know you got this answer, but trust this. Come to us, and we can give you that more accurate or information. I see Karen is smiling there. Hi, Karen. Can you talk?
Oh, yes, I am outside, and so that's why I've had it on mute. But yes, I agree 100%. The experts are the ones that help to clarify what you're reading and seeing online. So we still, people are concerned about their jobs, but you're going to have a
Yes.
job. It's just going to evolve. So,
Totally.
yes.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So we are 1 minute over now, but I wanted to ask you one question. I will also, because when the other interesting thing that you said was around the gluten free, which is interesting because we kind of saw gluten free go down.
Hmm.
And now again with GLP-1, it's coming up again
Yeah.
because people are following grain-free diets.
Yeah.
And so now it's becoming hip again together with paleo and keto. And so my question really is around the impact of diet tribes, so the impact of diet trends. So you were saying that meat-free or meat alternatives are really popular.
Hmm.
What I'm seeing is hybrids are becoming very popular. So we're seeing things like jackfruit, being incorporated together with meat, for example. It's
Hmm.
because we don't see a massive uptick of veganism, for example. People have reverted back to consuming a bit more meat.
Hmm.
Um, After the initial hype, of and then the meat-free burgers tank, and now we see like, okay, well, people want to go more plant-based, but they don't want to give up all their meat, and so we are kind of seeing like the middle ground now of, well, how can I have a half meat, half plant kind of a burger that has a meat texture and taste?
Right.
Do you see any of that? Because that's what we're seeing and people are consuming
Yeah. Yeah.
on the
That's a very good point because I think it's true that I still believe there is a move towards I think more, well, I would say less meat-based diet overall. And I think that the overall kind of the macro level driver behind that is just the sustainability concerns. Because
Yes.
even though not everyone wants to, yeah, go vegan, not everybody has the kind of ethical or even environmental concerns driving their personal diets. I believe it is becoming gradually more and more of a challenge for business owners themselves to basically meet certain sustainability expectations. Also, hopefully, there will be more regulations on that front that would just upfront and try and force producers to go into that direction as well. That's why we see a lot of these products, like you mentioned, where it's still an attempt to cater to the carnivores, but
Yes.
that would actually, in terms of production, in terms of its impact on the environment, would be a little less damaging than just bare bones, cow farming for beef.
Yeah.
So I think that's true that the phenomenon is slightly more complicated than people just up and going vegan or vegetarian. But I think that really, and it wasn't pronounced enough when I was talking in my part. But yeah, that probably the necessity to become more sustainable is what is behind that generally, and it's also driving other things like maybe not necessarily plant-based but insect-based proteins and their inclusion in products too. We recently saw some headlines about it in European countries that there has been a new regulation that allowed a certain portion, like a certain part of a percentage of proteins in your usual food products come from insect
Okay.
sources. So I think it's going to be shifting just because it's becoming a bit of a necessity. And personally, I would say it's about time. I'm happy to see that. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, I thought that was a really, really great insight from two different angles, and how the food side and the tech side and the nutrition side all kind of blend, yeah, how it mixes up together. And I think that's fascinating. So just before we go, I just wanted to highlight that our next executive data brief, which is a deep dive into specific technologies in personalized health and nutrition and wellness, will be coming out in July. So these are 40 pages of our kind of perspective and state of the art in terms of science, in terms of consumer behavior and uptake, and also innovators in the marketplace. And with that, I just want to also include our contact details. So that's for both of us. I will also put his link in. I'll put it in the comment section after the webinar. If you want to book a meeting as well, we'll put our ones on there as well. And so the recording will be available, as we said, both on the Qina platform. I'm also going to post it on YouTube. So with that, I want to thank you for your participation, and I thought that was really fun. I think we should do it again. And it's amazing, like the things that, like, you can immediately think of so many questions, isn't it? Just to seeing it from two different sides, and even disagreeing is lovely, because we get surrounded by a lot of people that agree, and then sometimes you need to just see what is the real world perspective as well. So that's fantastic. So thank you so much for participating, and let's do another one. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Well, bye bye, everybody.
Thank you for having me. Bye bye.